It is without a doubt one of the most common theory topics in the entire series. Where is the player character's, father? It has spawned endless memes, speculation and more, but the simple fact of the matter is that most of these theories tend to rely on like 10% evidence and 90% speculation. Which can be fun and all, but filling an entire video with that much uncertainty is not my style. So I figured, how about we go past every single Pokemon game and more briefly, while sticking to the proof, try to figure out where your father might be while you go from getting your starter to becoming the champion. And we start of course in Kanto, without a doubt the region where this topic has been discussed the most. It's where the entire trope comes from, it's why Ash didn't have a father present until the very last anime episode, which wasn't even canon. Anyway, story for another day. And I feel quite confident that unless this is the first Pokemon video you ever watch, you're probably familiar with the relatively popular theory that all adult men in Kanto have been affected by a war that Lieutenant Surge mentions. Whether that means they're all stationed somewhere else, or died, or become imprisoned, or whatever, it's up to you. But I have to say that I personally never really liked this theory much. Or let me rephrase it, I like it, it's creative, but there is absolutely no way that this was the creator's intention, nor will this ever be made canon. So, your father did not die in the war. In fact, there is evidence of this in the literal Kanto games, both the original Red and Blue as well as the remakes. In Celadon City, you can come across an SNES at the department store, which will prompt your character to say, a sports game, Dad'll like that. By that phrasing alone, we can deduce the man is still alive, and you, as Red, also apparently at least know him to a decent enough extent that you know his interests. So then, where is he? Well, in universe that is basically impossible to say, especially because I think the actual answer, as in what the creators intended, isn't really reflected in-game whatsoever. So, the original Pokemon games, Gen 1, but also Gen 2 really, were very much designed to feel like a grand adventure as a Japanese kid might have them. It's literally how Satoshi Tajiri came up with the idea of the series. And when taking that into account, the pretty large absence of adult men can be explained a bit more innocently than war. You're at work. The lack of your father, Blue's father, just generally adult men in larger numbers unless they work with Pokemon, is meant to reflect the middle of a working day, where Japanese fathers are at their office jobs and the streets belong to the kids, elderly and stay-at-home moms. That is what I think the intention behind the absence of your father is. And while it may definitely not resonate as much with kids today, with how many women are part of the workforce and how much men too have dedicated more time to spending with their families, the fact of the matter is that not only is that a relatively recent development that definitely wasn't where it is now in the 90s, that traditional balance is more prevalent than in the West even today. I mean, Pokemon was and still is made by fathers like this, who spend their days in the office and only see their kids around dinner, if at all, essentially missing out on the adventures they have during the day. More evidence for this can be found in Earthbound, another game developed by Creatures. Ness's father in this game appears solely on the phone, to reflect he is at work basically every waking moment of his life. Like I said earlier though, this is difficult to translate into an in-game role, as Kanto, due to technical limitations mostly, is a small region with small cities and barely any unexplorable buildings. But if we suspend our disbelief a little and accept that, say, Viridian City is definitely intended to be larger than the 5 buildings it currently has, we could come to the conclusion that there are certainly plenty of normal, regular job buildings that we as the player never explore, but are still implied to be there. And if that's the case, I would wager that is where your father is. And to quickly bring this up before we move on to Johto, the father of Chase and Elaine, the protagonists of Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, is never mentioned, with the reference in Celadon Department Store removed. That said, I would still explain his absence in the same way as I did here. In Johto, we see the importance of family bonds amplified a bit, with your mother now playing a potentially larger role if you allow her to be your banker, and Silver becoming the first main character to have a father present, even if that connection wasn't established until Heart Gold and Soul Silver. However, despite that, Johto is actually one of the regions where we know the least about the identity of the player character's father. No matter if you're playing as Gold, Chris, even or Lara, your father is never acknowledged even once in the Johto games. Based purely on the fact that Johto and Kanto are culturally very similar, hell, Johto is even more traditional if anything, I would hazard a guess that your dad is missing for the same reason as in the original region, work. He could just as well be dead or separated from his family, journeying himself, or in jail for all we know, but I think the work angle is the most likely one, seeing as, like I said, Johto is probably the most Japanese-inspired region of them all. Based on their cultural norms at the time, an absent father is more likely to be absent due to work than due to divorce or whatever else, so that's the angle I'm going for. Oh, and by the way, if you needed more proof of how normal men being away from their family constantly for work was in Japan at the time, look no further than Norman of Hoenn. He is by all accounts happily married to your mother, yet is never seen at home and only ever encountered at the gym in Petalburg City, i.e. his work. But then, when we visit the fourth and currently final Japan-based region, Sinnoh, I think that for the first time ever, there are different things at play. First of all, even though the setting is still Japan, it's clear that by this point societal expectations have changed a bit, and that is reflected in the games. Johanna, your mother in Sinnoh, is arguably the most active mother the series has ever seen, actively participating in contests, being well connected in that industry, and even being a bit of a celebrity. If she can be all that and still actively present during your journey, I think it is unlikely that your father is simply at work or traveling as a trainer and never shows his face. The independence Johanna shows here for me points much more towards an actual split of some kind. Now, there is one thing we know about the player's father in these games, courtesy of Palmer, Barry's father. After his first defeat at your hands, he will compare your quality to your father's, showing that he is also a Pokémon trainer at the very least. If you then rematch him, he'll reflect on the memory from when he was young and he and your father went to the lake one day only to be attacked by Pokémon, which they fended off, making for Palmer's first introduction to the life of a trainer. Which now means that not only is the mother of his child frequently present in the story, your father's childhood friend is as well. And yet, he never shows his face. That's very odd to me, and unlike anything we've seen before or since really. And while the reveal that he was a Pokémon trainer could mean he's out on a journey somewhere, I can't help but feel that Lucas or Don's father is no longer alive. And this is actually literally what happened outside of the game. Leftover script from Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl dating all the way back to the development of the originals reveals that your father was once upon a time meant to appear in-game, but was cut. All of this leads me to believe the most likely reason for your father's absence here is a most painful one. He's dead. There is no rock-hard evidence to support that, I must say, but I think it explains his absence the best under the circumstances. Gen 5 has 2 sets of protagonists, and that also means 2 fathers we have to figure out the location of. However, despite having double the amount of games to draw information from, all we have to work with here are a grand total of 2 sentences. Both do reveal that they too were once Pokémon trainers though. In the original Black and White, whenever you heal your team at your mother's, she will say your father went on a journey of his own. Seeing as this is the first time your dad going out on adventures himself is ever mentioned, I would say that this is also the first time where him being out on an adventure of his own is actually the most likely. After all, if all we know about someone is the fact that they enjoy going out on lengthy journeys, where would you say he most likely is during his absence? Exactly. In Black and White 2, this journey angle isn't presented as strongly, with your mother instead recalling how she and your father met. She was working as a Pokémon Center lady and he was a visitor. While you could deduce from that he was on a journey across the region, that is not confirmed, nor does it say anything about where he currently is. It is implied that your mother worked at the Pokémon Center in either Mistral or Nimbasa City, but that also doesn't help much. Both cities are absolutely traveling hubs, having airports and subway stations for example. But that's not enough to simply conclude that must mean your father was traveling. So yeah, this is the first where I feel like I'm well and truly just guessing, as there is basically nothing to go off for Nate and Rosa's father to make any solid assessment. For lack of anything better, let's group him in with the father from the original Black and White and say that he too was traveling. Who knows, maybe they're traveling together. Next up is Kalos, which is without a doubt one of the strangest of them all. First of all, we have the fact that similar to Sinnoh, your mother Grace is actually quite active in this game, having been a bit of a celebrity through her time as a ride-on racer. She is not really as active as Johanna during the story, but it does make clear that she at one time very much had her own career in the spotlight. However, it's also during these days that we hear a story about Caleb or Serena's father that's frankly bizarre. Talk to her while your team is at full health, and she'll recall a story where she couldn't stop at the finish line and charged right into your father, sending him flying. Now, surely this is not the reason he's absent from the game, right? That would be incredibly dark, especially when you factor in that this would then be your mom cheerfully recalling how she murdered your dad. But at the same time, this is literally the only time he is acknowledged in-game at any point. We know literally nothing about him except for this. So, at the same time, I find the idea that he is severely injured or even worse, dead, as a result of this incident to be completely unrealistic, yet also the one the evidence points towards. But I guess that in a case like this, it's better to keep a realistic outlook and say that even if Kalos' father is no longer with us, this probably wasn't his last moment on Poke Earth. So, with a complete lack of evidence, we continue to Alola, where we may have 2 sets of games, but 1 duo of protagonists, and so, also only 1 father and mother. This generation very much follows in the footsteps of the last one, with a situation that is honestly borderline inexplicable. So, the idea in this game is that you, your mother and your Meowth move to Alola from Kanto without your father. And while that sounds like Estranged Family 101, that is actually not the case. The Rotom decks can mention that your mother received a letter from your father and that it made her really happy, showing that they are still very much in love. She also took his car along to the island and now uses it for errands. So we now have the situation where your parents are clearly still in love and presumably together, yet you also live thousands of miles apart, assuming real life distances are accurate to the Pokemon world. How does that work? Well, really the only thing that makes sense is that your father has a job that requires him to stay behind. Why your mother would then ever move to the other side of the planet with his child is beyond me, but maybe the idea is that eventually your dad will follow, which is something we never see in-game because there's no passes of time. It is really the only scenario that makes sense, rare as it is in the real world. It could be that there's some sort of Japanese culture thing going on here and that this isn't as rare and bizarre as it feels for me, but I can't find anything about that if that's the case. In Galar, we are locals again, to the point our mum is even referred to as Mum in Sword and Shield, British spelling and all. Here, your dad is only alluded to once, and very minorly at that. The bag you obtain at the start of the game is his old one. That is all we know. He once owned the bag. Whether he died while using it, works as an accountant and simply bought a new one, or used this to travel the entire Pokemon world, we have no clue. But seeing as this is the first game since Johto where your mother does not even acknowledge or mention your father even once, I would be willing to go as far as to say they're either not on great terms or he's out of the picture. Purely based on how casual the line of grabbing his old bag is, I don't think he's dead, otherwise there would be more gravity to you using his old bag. Instead, I'm thinking he's either divorced from your mother or on a lengthy journey himself, which essentially boils down to the same thing, just with different ways of spending his life. But yeah, it goes without saying that one mere line is not a lot to work with. But it is still more than we have to go off in Paldea. Because, just like in Johto, all these decades back, your father is not acknowledged whatsoever in Scarlet and Violet at all, which actually makes you unique in your little friend group. Combine this with the fact that you only recently moved to Paldea with your mother and pets Quovid, and I feel quite confident in saying your mom is single and your father is back in Galar, where you presumably came from. Whether he's a deadbeat, a great guy but they couldn't work it out, or anything in between, we simply don't know. But unlike in Alola, where the situation appeared to be similar, there is nothing to suggest here your mom feels anything for him. And yeah, if you then move to an entirely different country without him, I'm assuming you're not together anymore. So, that has been all 10 fathers. Do you have any theories of your own on where our fathers may be at in these titles? Share it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like and subscribe to the channel to stay updated on all my future Pokemon content coming up. For now, thanks for watching and enjoy the rest of your day.